This is Bedtime Stories, Grown-Up Edition, Notorious 5, Part 14. When we left off, our boy Q was back home. He got reacquainted with his wife and had a real deep conversation with his mother and his father. He and the crew are juggling two major issues: the disappearance of the man who was harassing Anya and a plot against the life of the Queen Mother. We've gone from 2 suspects in the disappearance and possible death of Christian to 3, Anya, Ron, and Donovan. And from 1 possible suspect in the plot against the Queen Mother to 3, Pops Andy's high school sweetheart, India, Miss Bernie, and the Queen Mother's baby sister, Jira. So, just in case you don't remember, when Samuel pulled that little scheme on Ramirez Sr. back in Trinidad when Q and Donovan were small children, the Ramirezes retaliated by ambushing the Baptiste family home in Trinidad, resulting in the death of the Queen Mother's mother and Samuel's twin sister, Kay. Their baby sister, Jira, was the only one who made it out of that situation alive. The Queen Mother was married with children and living in New York and out of the business. And Samuel was fighting for the seat as the head of the Baptiste family. The Queen Mother came in and cleaned up his mess and made herself public enemy number 1. So when Q got back home on Tuesday night, after talking with the Queen Mother and Pops Andy, Angela was awake and she had questions. Angela said, "Listen, I'm sure that there's a lot going on. And I'm sure you probably don't want to tell it all to me. You're probably worried about what I can and can't handle." Q said, "I'm going to tell you as much as I can, but I have a feeling that I'm going to need your help on this." Q gave her the rundown about the situation with Donovan staying in the Dominican Republic, what he told them about the plot against the Queen Mother, and what he'd found out so far about Pops Andy's involvement with India and all the lies that she's told. Then Q asked, "Is there any way that Bernie might have been in New York about 4 months back?" Angela said, "I'm not sure. I'm going to have to check the files." That's the beauty season, so there were beauty expos all over the country during that time period. There was Essence Festival, Beauty Week in New York, the LA Hair Expo, Bronner Brothers. There was so much going on that initially everybody in leadership was booked to go to at least 4 of those expos. So I can't possibly know if she went to any of them, and if she did, which one she went to. Q said, "How soon can you find out?" Angela said, "Is there any reason why I can't call her right now and ask?" Q said, "You can, but let's come up with a good cover first." About 30 minutes later, Angela called Miss Bernie, and when Miss Bernie answered, Angela said, "Hey, Miss Bernie, so I was sitting here thinking about next year's beauty and fashion season. I know you had to completely rearrange this year's schedule because of that whole situation that went down. So I'm going to need a real quick accounting of who went to which events this year so that I can start figuring out who should go to which ones next year. I'd actually like to meet soon so that we can discuss the pros and cons, who enjoyed which events and which ones we should skip and who we should switch out. But for right now, can you recall who went to which ones?" Then Miss Bernie ran down the list. There were about 30 events that were supposed to be split between 15 people and an entire algorithm to make sure that there were at least 3 to 4 people in all of the major city events. Ms. Bernie was forced to hire temps and have the remaining 11 full-time employees travel with temporary employees. Initially, she and Rennie were in support roles, so they were going to be traveling with a lead. But she ended up redistributing all of those support positions and leading all of the ones that Angela was supposed to take. And one of them was New York. Before Angela called Miss Bernie, her and Q discussed what she would say if Miss Bernie said that she'd gone to New York. So when Miss Bernie was done running down the list, Angela said, "So, tell me about your experience in New Orleans." When Miss Bernie was done with that recap, Angela said, "And how was LA?" When Miss Bernie was done with the LA recap, Angela switched things up a little and said, "Now, you said Amari went to Seattle, right?" Miss Burney said, "Yes, she did." Angela said, "Now, did she provide you with a summary that you could recall where you could at least give me the highlights? I'll speak with her myself when we have that meeting and get the full recap from her." Miss Burney gave her a brief summary, and then Angela said, "Now, who did you say went to New York?" Miss Burney said, "Oh, that was me." Angela said, "And how was that event?" Miss Burney gave her a full recap of the event, and when she was about done, she said, "And you'll never believe who I met the last day of the expo." Angela said, "Who?" Miss Burney said, "I met members of Bella's family. Apparently, her niece and sister were in New York, and they came by the expo. They came to the booth because they wanted to see the booth of Q's wife." Angela said, "Oh, really? Why didn't you mention that before?" Miss Burney said, "No particular reason. There was just so much going on that I really forgot about it. Had you not asked, I wouldn't have thought about it again unless I saw them again or we were talking about New York." Angela said, "Oh, okay. And who did you say you met again?" Miss Burney said, "Bella's niece and her sister. I can't remember the niece's name. I think she said her name was Stacy or Serafina. I don't remember, child. But I remember her sister's name was Jira. She came by the booth and she was just so sad to hear about the fire at you and Q's house. And we ended up meeting for drinks later on that night and just getting to know each other a little bit." And then Angela said, "And did she tell you that she and the Queen Mother are estranged from one another?" Miss Burney said, "Eventually she did get to that. She told me about how they grew up in Trinidad and how there was an accident or some kind of incident at the family home that Bella's been blaming her for her entire life, and that she hadn't seen or spoken to Bella or her children since they were children." Angela said, "And what, if anything, did you tell her?" Bernie said, "Well, I figured if her and Bella were estranged, that she probably didn't want me to be telling any of her business, so I didn't. Plus, I don't really know any of her business. But I did tell her about Veronica and Donovan having a baby, and when she asked if they had plans to marry, I was honest and I told her that Donovan had had another baby about the same time, and so they were having a difficult time working things out. But I mostly told her how I found out that Veronica was my niece, and that I had been friends with your mother for a long time, and that I had been a long-time employee of Vibrantly You. We didn't talk about the ambush or anything that happened with that situation or my suspicions that you might be alive. None of that came up, I promise." Then Angela asked, "Did she ask anything about Pops Andy?" And Miss Burney said, "No, she didn't. And if she would have, I wouldn't have told her anything, because again, that would have been Bella's business." All out of questions in reference to New York and needing to keep up appearances, Angela asked about the other cities that Bernie'd gone to. And Angela made sure to show just as much interest in what Bernie had to say about those cities as she did about what Bernie had to say about her visit to New York. When she was done, Angela told her to go ahead and set that meeting up for later on in the week. And then they hung up and Q stopped the tape recorder. Angela said, "Your instincts are impeccable, babe. How did you guess?" Q said, "Medea never stopped us from communicating with Aunt Jera, but Donovan and I eventually stopped communicating with her ourselves when we noticed that every time we talked to her, she tried to pump us for information about Medea or try to get us to pass messages that we knew she wouldn't want to receive. We also knew that she was in a bad way financially, because when the Queen Mother cut her off, so did Uncle Samuel. We didn't have all the details about what went down at the family home in Trinidad, and we certainly didn't know what all went on with Anya in Trinidad. But we knew that the Queen Mother was done with Aunt Jera when Anya came back." When Angela asked what happened, Q told Angela what he could recall. Q said, "I don't really know. What I remember is waking up in the morning and Pops Andy telling me that Medea had to rush to Trinidad because something happened with Anya. A few days later, we got a call from her saying that Anya was okay, and A week, 2 weeks later, her and Anya came back, and the Queen Mother was done with Anjera. When I talked to her tonight, she basically said that her and Anjera are enemies. And then she told me that Anjera was the one who gave Anya the concoction in Trinidad that caused her to have the miscarriage. Apparently, whatever was in it almost killed Anya. Angela asked, why would she give an 11, 12-year-old child something like that without her parents' permission? Q said, who knows? But Medea told me that Aunt Jira used that same concoction herself shortly after the attack on the family house in Trinidad. She never told anybody that she was pregnant, and she never said who the father was. When the Queen Mother rushed to Trinidad to find out what was going on with Anya, and she found out that Aunt Jira gave her the concoction, that's when Aunt Jira came clean and said that she'd taken that cocktail all those years back and that she was perfectly fine, no side effects. So she assumed that Anya would be fine too. It took everything for Angela to maintain her composure, hearing about all that Anya had been through, and it broke her heart just imagining what that had to be like for an 11, almost 12-year-old girl. While Q held Angela in his arms, he called his cousin Salima. When Salima answered, she said, what the guan, cuz? Q greeted her in patois, and then he said, I need to see you, cousin. Salima asked, well, when you coming to New York? I'm here. Q said, nah, I can't leave town. I got babies on the way. I need you to come to see me. Salima said, what's up? It sounds serious. Q said, it is. If I can get AJ to bring you here first thing in the morning, can you get here? Salima said, unlike you, I have a real job, Quincy. I can't just hop on a plane and fly to Texas on a whim. Q said, oh, I don't have a real job, huh? I don't have a full-time job, a business, a wife, and 3 kids. All of those is jobs. Angela punched him in the chest and said, oh, I'm a job now. Salima, hearing her voice in the background, said, hey, cousin. Angela said, hey, Salima, girl. Then Salima said, is this something that can wait until Friday, Quincy? Q said, no, it's not. I need to see you ASAP, and it's not something that we can discuss on the telephone. Salima said, well, let me check my schedule. I'm going to call you right back. Meanwhile, Wise has wasted no time scoping out India. He's played ball at a neighborhood park right down the street from the house that she's renting. Got himself sufficiently sweaty so he'd have a real good reason to walk down the street with his shirt off, sweat dripping from his body. As he slowly walked past India's house, he peeped her sitting on the porch, enjoying a cold drink on a hot Texas day. He stopped, made eyes with her, turned on that New York charm, gave her a compliment, got her to bring him a cool drink, chatted her up, and got her to agree to a date later on that night. So when Q was wrapping up his conversation with his cousin Salima back in New York City, Wise was blowing Granny's back out in her rented house on the south side of Dallas. He'd picked her up earlier in his old school El Camino, took her to get a bite to eat, and then ended the night at an old school blues and jazz wine spot. Got her sufficiently tipsy and talked his way into her house and talked her out of her drawers. When he put her to sleep, he placed bugs all around the place. Then he snuggled up beside her like he never left. A few hours later, he woke her up 3, 4 o'clock in the morning and told her that he had to hit the road. He knew better than to overstay his welcome. He was a young buck dealing with a cougar. And when he left, he didn't leave her any way to get in contact with him. He needed her to be looking for him, not the other way around. The following day, the family was back in their usual routine, all except the Queen Mother, who was still at Donovan's house. Q and LJ were on school drop-off duty. Regina was at the warehouse, walking funny, and Pop Sandy was at Donovan's company, keeping everything going. On Q's way in the Tico, he got a phone call from his cousin Salima. She said, cousin, I can get there tonight, but I have to be back first thing tomorrow morning.